My name is Sergeant Eric Cole. I'm part of operations and logistics on Fort Ridge, a mid-level Army base tucked in the hills of North Carolina. I've been here long enough to know how things move, how people shift blame, and how the ones who clean up messes never get medals. Life on base isn't all drills and salutes. Most days feel like a grind, quiet, repetitive, heavy with rules that no one bothers to question anymore. You do your job, you keep your head down. And if you're like me, you become the guy they count on when something falls apart, but never the guy they thank when it's put back together. It was late on a Friday when Captain Mason dropped a thick, stapled nightmare of a report onto my desk. Strategic readiness presentation, due Monday morning. It wasn't just rough, it was wrong. Data from last year, graphs with no legends, entire sections missing. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were friends and said, "You're good at this stuff, make it shine," then walked off like his weekend had already started. I stared at that folder like it might start bleeding. My shoulders were already tense from a 12-hour shift, and now this. A weekend ruined. Again. There's a certain kind of silence that settles in your chest when you realize you're not even angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being the fix-it guy for people who wear rank like armor but can't do the work themselves. I didn't argue. I never do. I just opened the report, pulled out my laptop, and got to work. The office around me emptied out. Lights clicked off one by one, but I stayed, same as always, fixing what no one else wanted to touch, and knowing damn well that come Monday, my name wouldn't be on any of it. That's where it all started. Lieutenant Mason had a gift for showing up just long enough to hand someone else a problem. Then he'd vanish, reappear when the smoke cleared, and somehow walk away with the credit. The man could turn a botched assignment into a talking point, a shallow plan into a promotion bullet, and people let him. He wore charm like a uniform, always flashing that easy grin, dropping a few buzzwords and calling it leadership. I was just the guy he dumped things on. I don't think he even remembered half the stuff he made me fix. Strategic reviews, logistics rewrites, even his personal presentation notes once. I'd find them dumped on my desk with a sticky note or a comment in passing. "Make it solid, Sergeant. You're good at that." Then he'd vanish to wherever officers went to drink coffee and tell war stories that weren't theirs. That Friday was no different. Mason slid the binder across my desk like he was dealing cards. Said it needed to be bulletproof by Monday and told me not to overthink it. I opened the first few pages and felt my stomach twist. Outdated stats, copied paragraphs, even a spelling error in the title slide. He didn't want this cleaned up. He wanted it, salvaged, resurrected from the dead, with no trace of how bad it had been. I was halfway through redlining a section on fleet readiness when I heard a voice behind me. "If you want, I can stick around. Help out." I turned and saw Liam, the new kid, 18, maybe 19, still had that fresh look in his eyes like the Army hadn't scraped it off yet. Quiet type, always on time, never spoke more than needed. I almost told him no. It wasn't his job, and I didn't want to drag someone else into another one of Mason's messes. But I saw the way he looked at the report, like he already knew how bad it was, so I just nodded and slid him a section. He sat down without another word, pulling out his laptop and a cheap notebook, already underlining lines and jotting notes. We worked side by side in silence. No small talk. Just the soft clatter of keyboards and the low hum of the heater overhead. It was past 1900 when the hallway lights dimmed on the timer. Most of the base was already shut down. I was used to that, used to being the last one in the room. What I wasn't used to was someone choosing to stay. Liam didn't ask questions. He scanned data, cross-checked charts, highlighted inconsistencies. He flagged 2 charts that were built off the wrong baseline and pointed out a glaring error in the tactical mobility forecast. I didn't expect that from a new recruit. Most of them barely knew how to open a report, let alone fix one. Mason would never know. He'd never ask. He'd just walk in Monday morning, flip through the slides, and nod like it was exactly what he expected all along. But Liam was still there, still working, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone in the grind. Around 2200, I poured us both stale coffee from the machine near the back. He took it without complaint, just gave me a short nod and went back to work. We didn't speak much, but something unspoken had started to settle. A kind of mutual recognition, like maybe we both understood what it meant to be overlooked. Mason had always assumed I'd take the hit quietly, and I usually did. But that night, watching Liam flag another line Mason had butchered, I felt something shift. Maybe it was just the caffeine, or maybe it was the first crack in the routine. The kid didn't have to help. He didn't owe me anything, but he stayed. And that meant more than I could say at the time. Because sometimes, when the system keeps taking, the smallest act of decency feels like defiance. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's failure alone. We started with the drone surveillance section. The numbers looked too clean, too impressive. Liam flagged a stat that claimed a 96% coverage rate in desert terrain. He pulled the last operations report and showed me the real figure, just under 67%. It was off by nearly a third, and that was only the first slide. I scratched it out with a red pen and opened the shared drive where the raw field data lived, buried beneath layers of admin folders. The further we dug, the worse it got. PR quotes lifted word for word from a morale campaign 2 years ago. One even repeated twice in different fonts. Charts with no sources, trend lines that magically curved upward no matter what the data said. I started a new file and titled it quietly in my head, Something That Tells the Truth. Liam handled the logistics timeline while I rechecked the drone imagery timestamps. One of the key examples was from a different base entirely. Different state, wrong unit, still labeled as ours. We didn't talk much, just moved like parts of the same machine. I'd check a number, he'd trace it back, I'd find a hole in a slide. He'd already have a note ready to patch it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. By midnight, a third of the original file was gone. In its place, we had live data, new visuals, and citations linked to official records. I didn't care how pretty it looked yet. I just needed it to be real. Liam leaned over once and said something I'd been thinking all night, that this report wasn't a presentation. It was camouflage, a shiny front to distract from how little anyone upstairs actually understood. I nodded but didn't answer. He already knew I agreed. There's a weight to real data. It doesn't flex for convenience. It just sits there, heavy and unmovable. Each fixed slide felt like lifting a stone off a pile someone else had buried us under. I hadn't felt pride in this job for a long time. But when I saw the fourth section rebuild itself with honest numbers and nothing to hide, I felt something settle in my chest. It wasn't hope exactly, but it was close. Around 3 in the morning, Liam rubbed his eyes and pointed to a block of projections tied to airfield coverage. The slide claimed we'd see a 22% improvement in target acquisition next quarter. He squinted at the note beneath the chart, then pulled up the equipment manifest. That's when it hit us. The whole boost relied on a radar system listed as delivered, but never installed. I stared at the screen like it had just spit in my face. I checked the base requisition logs. The radar was still in transit, delayed twice. Mason had built a fantasy around hardware we didn't even have. I felt the tension rise in my back like a pulled wire. Liam didn't say anything for a moment. He just sat back, arms crossed, reading the slide again, like it might change if he stared long enough. We could have just deleted the section, could have slapped in some safer numbers and called it a night. But neither of us moved. I opened a new deck, saved it with a new name. ECLM Real Ops. For a second, it felt like I'd done something illegal. Then Liam cracked his knuckles and said, we should rebuild the forecast using only verified benchmarks. We didn't need fiction. The truth was tough, but it still stood on its own. The next hour felt different. Less like cleanup, more like creation. We outlined 3 realistic operational outcomes based on current tech, all supported by field logs and unit feedback. Liam pulled support ticket summaries while I reworked the mission readiness table. The new slides didn't glow, but they held. They had backbone. I glanced over once and caught Liam with his head resting on his forearm, eyes half shut. He looked up and smirked like we'd survived something. I passed him a granola bar I'd forgotten in my bag, and he ate it like it was steak. We didn't say it out loud, but we both knew. This version wasn't for Mason. It was for us. A proof of what the truth looked like when you had the guts to show it. And maybe, for the first time in too long, that was enough to keep going. Monday hit cold and early. I walked into the operations room with the revised report printed clean, slides aligned and color-coded tabs in place. Liam was already there, sitting at the edge of the row, quiet as always. He gave me a slight nod, the kind you pass between people who've been through something together but aren't ready to talk about it yet. Lieutenant Mason strolled in, 10 minutes late, coffee in hand, sunglasses still on, like we were out in the field. He gave the room a lazy smile and laid the deck on the podium like it was a trophy. I watched him flip to the title slide with a little dramatic pause, like he was about to unveil a masterpiece. He launched into the briefing with polished confidence, pacing slowly, hands moving just enough to look natural. His voice rode the edge between casual and commanding, and every word was ours. My phrasing, Liam's data, even the dumb little onboarding joke I threw in at 2 a.m. It landed, and the room laughed like Mason had written it himself. I kept my face still, jaw tight, hands folded in my lap. Across the room, Liam didn't blink. He stared straight ahead like he was somewhere else. And maybe he was. Maybe he had already guessed how this would play out, and just wanted to see how far it would go. Slide after slide, Mason sold our work like it had dropped out of his brain fully formed. Charts we cleaned, quotes we vetted, every insight stolen from the version with our initials on it. He never mentioned the hours we pulled, never said our names. Just moved through the slides like they were footnotes to his performance. At one point, he tossed out a line I'd used in a private comment to Liam, a small joke about radar overlap zones. I watched the senior officers chuckle, then jot something down. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger, not even surprise, just a deeper kind of disappointment. The kind that comes from knowing this wasn't a mistake. It was a system. Liam stayed silent. I could tell his hands were clenched in his lap, shoulders just a little stiffer. He didn't look at me, but I felt him, noticing the same things I did. The way Mason kept using the word "we like," it was a magic trick. Like inclusion could erase theft. The briefing ended with polite nods and a round of light applause. Mason gave a little bow, like some actor on a cheap stage. Then he looked toward us, eyes skipping over me like I was furniture, and told Liam to stay in the room for optics. That word stuck in my head like a splinter. I stood when the others stood, walked to the side wall like I always did, back straight, face unreadable, but inside, I was somewhere else entirely, not broken, not bitter, just waiting. Because something about the way Liam was watching him told me this wasn't over. The moment I knew something was off, it wasn't loud. No sudden music, no spotlight, just a glance. Liam's eyes flicked toward the back of the room as the brass filed in. One of them, General Hawthorne, walked with that kind of quiet authority that pulls all the air to him. He didn't look at anyone until he looked at Liam. It wasn't a long look, barely a second. But it had weight. A small nod, subtle, not the kind you give to any soldier in uniform. Liam didn't return it, just tightened his shoulders and adjusted his sleeve like nothing happened. But I caught it. I stood frozen in place, the buzz of Mason's speech floating past like background noise. My mind looped the name again. Hawthorne. Liam's last name was... I couldn't remember hearing it. He never said it. No patch on the chest yet. No formal intro. Just Liam. Quiet, respectful, a little too composed for someone so green. Then it hit me. Hawthorne. Same sharp jawline. Same stillness in their posture. The way Liam always seemed to be watching instead of reacting. Like he wasn't learning how the system worked. He was measuring it. Mason was still pacing in front of the slides, parroting back every word Liam and I had built. I barely heard him. My focus was on the back corner now, where General Hawthorne stood with arms crossed. He wasn't looking at Mason. He was watching Liam. That's when it clicked. Liam wasn't just a new recruit sent to shadow the unit. He was placed here, and not by accident. Observation, not participation. He wasn't here to help. He was here to see how the machine ran from the inside, to see who broke under pressure, who claimed what wasn't theirs. My stomach tightened, not with fear but with clarity. This wasn't just a bad weekend with a stolen report. It was a test. And we were all already inside it. I didn't know how much Liam had seen, but judging by the calm in his face, it was enough. He turned his head slightly and locked eyes with me. No smile, no signal. Just that same look from Friday night, steady and measured. I held his gaze for half a second, just long enough to let him know. I saw it now, and if I was right, the briefing wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning. When Mason clicked to the final slide, he stood there like a man expecting applause. His arms spread slightly, lips curled in that practiced smile he wore for inspections and ceremonies. But the room stayed still. No one clapped, no one nodded. Not a single pen scratched across a notepad. Just the hum of the AC and the soft tick of a wall clock. It was the kind of silence that doesn't settle. It waits. General Hawthorne leaned back slowly, hands folded. He looked at Mason with that calm, unreadable expression some leaders wear when they already know the answer. Then he asked one question. "Is that everything?" Mason blinked. His smile flickered. He stammered a reply about tightening for time, about streamlined messaging. But Hawthorne never looked away. His gaze shifted toward Liam. Liam sat still for a moment, then straightened. His voice didn't shake. "No, sir, it isn't." Every head turned. I felt the air change. Even Mason stopped moving. Liam reached into his folder and pulled out a tablet, the real report, the one we stayed up rebuilding from scratch. He tapped the screen once. The projection on the wall changed. Charts, live metrics, the truth. He didn't grandstand, he didn't gloat, just stated the facts, calmly, clearly. This version includes updated retention models, real drone metrics, and deployment timing matched to actual field equipment. Analysis provided by Sergeant Eric Cole. I didn't move, just stared ahead as all eyes turned toward me. General Hawthorne leaned forward slightly. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. Something alive was moving under the surface. Authority had shifted, and everyone felt it. Mason's face lost color. He tried to laugh, tried to explain. But no one was listening to him anymore. The floor belonged to Liam, and the truth was finally on the table. General Hawthorne stood and faced the room, but his eyes stayed on Mason. He said the report wasn't the only thing under review. Then he looked at Liam and called him by his full name. "Liam Hawthorne. My son." Mason froze. He tried to say something, but the words stuck. The room went still again, but this time the silence had weight. The general said Liam had been embedded for 6 weeks, watching, listening, not just to the numbers, but to the people behind them, to the choices made when no one thought they were being watched. Then he turned back to Mason and laid it out. "You falsified data. You silenced your team. You took credit for work you didn't understand." Mason stammered about timelines and team effort. The general didn't blink. He told him to step down. Effective immediately. Security moved before anyone else did. No yelling, no drama. Just a slow, stunned walk to the door. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt still, like I was afraid to breathe too deep in case the moment cracked. Then the general looked at me, said he knew I'd been carrying more than my share, said it was time that changed. He offered me the lead role on strategic planning, full authority, clean slate. I didn't jump out of my seat, didn't puff my chest or raise my voice. I just stood up, met his eyes, and gave a single nod. "Thank you, sir. I'll do it right." And in that quiet moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not relief, not pride, just a kind of peace that sits in your bones when truth finally wins. The next morning, I walked through the same hallway I'd taken 100 times before. The floors hadn't changed, neither had the walls. But the way people looked at me had. It wasn't wide-eyed or over the top, just subtle nods, a little space given where there hadn't been any before, like they finally saw the weight I'd been carrying. Liam was waiting by the stairwell, coffee in hand. He didn't say much, just gave a nod, simple and honest, then disappeared into the crowd without needing a word. I sat at my new desk, the same one that used to feel like a cage. Now it felt different, not lighter, not easier, just mine. The folder on top of the pile had my name printed at the top, not tucked in a corner, not buried in the footnotes. Led, Sergeant Eric Cole. I opened the file, took a breath, and got to work. Not because I had to clean up someone else's mess, but because now I got to shape what came next. And sometimes that's more than enough.